Morning, everyone. Thanks for being here, and I would also like to thank the Center for Bhutan and GNH Studies and the other institutions who organized this event and for their very generous invitation. So today I'm going to present on a small part of my ongoing PhD research, which focuses on a commentary on the Mañjuśrī nāmasaṅgīti by Rong-Zom Chos-kyi-bzang-po, who was a seminal scholar of the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism. For those of you who might not be too familiar with the topic, I'm going to first give a very brief overview of the nāmasaṅgīti, of the author of the commentary, and of the commentary itself. And then go into a little bit more detail into one of the chapters of the commentary. The nāmasaṅgīti is a circa 7th to 8th century tantric Buddhist scripture listing the names of Mañjuśrī Jnana Sattva, or Mañjuśrī, the knowledge or gnosis being. It is practically, in fact, a list of names in the nominative case in the Sanskrit. The title Mañjuśrī nāmasaṅgīti, with which it is perhaps most commonly known in secondary sources, does not appear to be attested in actual Sanskrit manuscripts, but only in transcribed titles of Tibetan translations, meaning Sanskrit titles transcribed into Tibetan characters. In the scripture itself, we find longer expressions, such as in verses 10 to 11, Mañjuśrī Jnana Sattvasya nāmasaṅgītim uttamam, so the best or the foremost, the chanting of the names of Mañjuśrī, the knowledge being, or in the colophon, even longer ones, such as Bhagavato Mañjuśrī Jnana Sattvasya Paramartha nāmasaṅgītihi, or the chanting of the names, whose nature is ultimate, absolute, Paramartha, of the knowledge being Mañjuśrī, the Bhagavan. The scripture claims to be extracted from the Samadhi chapter of a 16,000 verse Mula Tantra, or even Mahayoga Tantra, the Mayajala Tantra. But the Mayajala, which is extant in the Kangyur, in the Tibetan canon, does not contain it. This is not typical only of the Mañjuśrī nāmasaṅgīti, but also of other tantras, such as the Chakrasambhara, for instance, which also claims to be extracted from a much longer, no more extant Mula Tantra. The text, in fact, begins with Atha, or Tene in Tibetan, which is, for metrical reasons, in place of Athataha. It means now, then, and in fact, it indicates that it follows other preceding chapters of a longer text. The text consists in 162 shlokas, followed by a prose section describing the benefits of the recitation of the names, itself followed by a short mantra section and 5 concluding shlokas. The text has been, of course, translated in Tibetan as well as in Chinese, etc. There is an early translation listed in the imperial catalogs, 8th to 9th century, Denkarma Pangtangma. Subsequently, the most commonly quoted version in the commentary is that translated by Rinchen Zampo, which, according to Giacomello Rufino, who studied the translation, corresponds widely with the version contained in the local Puttak Kangyur. The translation, though, that has been inserted or put by Putan Rinchen at the head of the Tantras in the Kangyur is the 13th century revision by Lote Nipa Shong Lojo Tempa, who flourished in the second half of the 13th century. And there is a further revision of the revision, if you will, of the 15th century by Shalulotsawa Dharmapala Bhadra. We also find translations among the Dunhuang manuscripts, among which there are translations which do not have the prose section, so they only contain the verses. One is incomplete, the other complete, and they more or less correspond to Rinchen Zampo's translation. There is a Paleo-Tibetan 99.2, the last one, which also appears to correspond to Rinchen Zampo's translation, which is with the prose section and complete. And there is another one, which is incomplete with the prose section, that might, due to several very different readings, correspond to an even earlier translation of the text. The text is also transmitted in the paracanonical collections, such as the Nima Gyumbum and the Nima Kamagyepa. The text has been translated into English, and among the most widely and most famous, perhaps, English translations, there are those by Ronald Davidson, who also compiled various Sanskrit editions of the text. One by Alex Wayman and one by Alexander Berzin, mainly based on the Tibetan translation of the text. And verses 1 to 41 have also very recently been translated by Anthony Tribe. There are further online translations, such as the one by Ryan Conlon and Stefan Mang for the Lotsawa House, and a forthcoming translation by Drs. Julian Schott, Cécile Duché, and others for the 84,000 project. The importance and the importance of the nāmasaṅgīti cannot be overstated, as testified by the sheer amount of works, of related works, such as commentaries, sadhanas, etc., on the nāmasaṅgīti that are contained in the Tibetan canon. There are around 129 related works. Among the commentaries on the text that are still extant in Sanskrit, there are three such commentaries. The first one is by the circa late 8th century Vilasavajra, the Nama Mantrar Tavalokini, which is quite an important text, as if the dating given by Anthony Tribe, who edited the first 5 chapters of the text, is correct, then it might be the earliest Buddhist commentary that is still extant in its Sanskrit original. There is a later 11th, 12th century commentary by Ravi Srijñana, the Amrita Kanika, which is also accompanied by the sub-commentary by Vibhuti Chandra, and a yet unpublished, not unpublished, you can find the images online, but yet unedited manuscript text by Advaya Vakra or Advaya Chakra, which, as suggested by various scholars, might be a slip for Advaya Vajra, to be distinguished, however, by the master Maitreya Natha, which is called the Buddha Pada, and could be a circa 11th century text. It's a very, very long text. Now, as for the author of the commentary I am studying on the nāmasaṅgīti, Rong-Zom Chos-kyi-bzang-po, his dates are uncertain, but we can say that he flourished in the late 11th, early 12th century, that is during the second spread of Buddhism in Tibet. He was, according to various biographies that were written on him, born in Narlung-rong, a district in Rulag, in the western Tibetan region of Lower Tsang. He is considered by some to be an emanation of Mañjuśrī because of his great acumen, intellect, and ease in learning languages, specifically Sanskrit. By some, he is regarded as a reincarnation, if you will, or by others, a disciple of Smriti Jnana Kirti, himself a rather obscure figure, but who is very important in Rong-Zompa's intellectual environment. And by others, the reincarnation of Acharya Talaringwa. He's also said to have met Atisha or Adhisha Dipankara Shri-Jnana, who recognized him as the reincarnation of the Mahasiddha Krishnacharya. Interestingly, in addition to being a translator of tantric texts, Rong-Zompa was also the author of commentaries and treatises, which is quite exceptional for the 11th, 12th century. Among his most famous works, there is his commentary on the Guhya Garbha Tantra, his Könchoktrel, commentary on Padmasambhava's Mengatacheng, commentary on Smriti Jnana Kirti's grammar, the Margotsencha Tabu, and among his treatises, his magnum opus is usually considered to be his apology of the Dzogchen, the Tekchen Tsuljuk, who has been very recently edited in its entirety by Khenpo Tashi Dorje of the Ngangyur Kama Research Center, Ngangyur Nyima Research Center, sorry. His Nangwa Hartub and his Sansa Chenmo, also entirely edited by Dr. Ornan Mogi, edited and translated. As for his commentary on the Nāmasaṅgīti, it is listed in the list of texts compiled by his direct disciple Rompa Mebung, though without a specific title. So it only says commentary on the Mañjuśrī Nāmasaṅgīti. Also Mipam, who was the first compiler of Rong-Zom-pa's works, lists a commentary on the Nāmasaṅgīti, which he specifies to be a general commentary on the text, Chinten. The text itself appears with the title Nansun Shepa, explanation of 3 points or threefold explanation, in his collected works, his Sungbung, Suntorbu, and also in the paracanonical collection of the Katomi Makama in its various versions. And it is this version of the text that was translated by Turgu Sherdor in 2012. As first noted by Dr. Almogi, Rong-Zom-pa's text also appears with a different title, Tsulsun Warjepe Dhamma, in the Tengyur, so in the Tibetan canon, in all editions of the Tengyur, though without any authors or translators mentioned in the colophon. The text that I am editing, if compared to the other version transmitted in the collected works, is heavily corrupt, meaning that there are many omissions, duplications, very significant parts of texts are misplaced. And in fact, Puto Rinchentrup, in his catalog to the Shalutengyur, doubts the authenticity or Indian origin of this text. Now, as for the general structure of the text, as the title indicates, Nansun Shepa, it is divided into 3 main sections, and it is very symmetrically, if you will, organized or very neatly organized, as the first point on the nature of Mañjuśrī has no divisions itself, or it's in one point, if you will. And in this first chapter, he is ultimately said to be Mañjuśrī is said to be non-dual knowledge, Advaya Jnana, Nima-yeshe. The second point itself, divided into 2 subsections, deals with the names of Mañjuśrī, and it's the one I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in a second. And it is divided into general teaching or common teaching and the specific or uncommon teaching. And the third point itself, in 3 subsections, deals with chanting by viewing the names as having the meaning of good qualities, chanting by viewing the names as having the meaning of mantras, and chanting by viewing the names as having the meaning of non-duality. So practically it deals with how to consider or visualize the names while one is chanting them. Now, as for the second chapter of the text, on the names of Mañjuśrī, so what do these names actually mean? What do they represent? In this chapter, Rong-Zom-pa comments on verses from the Nāmasaṅgīti and interprets these verses in the following ways. So Mañjuśrī is said first to be the embodiment of all phenomena, the Chitamchiki Dagniyin. He's also said to pervade all phenomena in 4 manners, for instance, through dharmata, through knowledge, through compassion, through activities. He is said then to be the Lord of all phenomena, Wanchuk. He is said to generate all phenomena or create all phenomena, Kepa. And he also said to arise from all phenomena. In the section on the specific teaching in this chapter, the previous one was the common or more general one, Rong-Zom goes on to explain in more detail a few of the more doctrinally problematic points that he first laid out. For instance, that Mañjuśrī is the creator of all phenomena, or that he is the Lord of all phenomena. For instance, he starts by saying that Mañjuśrī is the defining characteristic, tsengi, of all phenomena, but he himself is not characterized by them. Mañjuśrī similarly pervades all phenomena, but he is not supported by them, tempa. Now, as for the most problematic point, perhaps, Mañjuśrī gives rise to all phenomena acting as their dominant condition, adipati pratyaya, which in Tibetan is tapekyen, but he is not their causal condition, hetu pratyaya, gyükyen. Mañjuśrī similarly arises on account of all phenomena, but phenomena are not Mañjuśrī's causal condition, and so on and so forth. Now, concentrating on one specific section of this second chapter, or of these points, that is where Rong-Zom interprets verses of the Nāmasaṅgīti as meaning that Mañjuśrī is the embodiment of all phenomena. Rong-Zom proceeds by citing 10 padas or verse quarters from the Nāmasaṅgīti, in which it is taught that Mañjuśrī is endowed with the nature of all entities, bhava, such as a vase, etc., with the nature of all non-entities, abhava dharma, or phenomena that are non-entities, such as space and so forth, and with the essence of all phenomena. Then he also gives a brief commentary on 3 out of those 10 padas. And to give you an example, we'll concentrate on this specific verse of the Nāmasaṅgīti, verse 45a. Namba chupo tenchi den, dashakaro dashartharto in Sanskrit, which Davidson translated, having 10 aspects, his purpose being the 10 reference, which is quite unintelligible without the help of a commentary. And I'm going to, this of course has been interpreted in very differing ways by the commentators, such as Manjusri Mitra, Vimala Mitra, etc. I'm presenting here Vilasa Vajra's exegesis because Rong-Zom heavily borrows text, very large sections of text from Vilasa Vajra's commentary, the Nama Mantrata Valokini, especially in the section devoted to the sadhana, to the visualization of the Vajradhatu Mahamandala. Anyways, Vilasa Vajra takes Nampachupo, or Dashakara, as the 10 false notions of a self, Atma Satgraha, Tenchu, Dasharta, as the 10 realities of skill, or Kaushalya Tattva, that act as the antidotes to the 10 false notions of a self. These are listed in the Madhyanta Vibhaga in chapter 3, that is the locus classicus of the citation. And the final dön, of course, it's interpreted as the purpose, meaning he whose purpose are the 10, right, etc. Rong-Zom follows Vilasa Vajra, though his text is slightly problematic. And if you bear with me for another couple of minutes, I would like to, if it works. I'm afraid it doesn't. Well, I think you're lucky. I wanted to show you a small conjecture I made to the text, so a slightly more philological example, because Rong-Zom's text was not entirely satisfying in its present condition, and even to show you a little bit of my methodology in studying these texts. But anyways, it's not too important, and thank you very much for your patience.